Welcome to the For Health's Sake podcast, brought to you by Edito Health, elevating digital transformation with a human touch. This episode is sponsored by Radical Health Festival. It's critical to be radical.
Hello, my name is Charles Alessi, and welcome to this episode of For Health's Sake. And today I'm talking about one of the most interesting, but one of the most complicated areas in health and care and data, and that is the use of data and anonymization of data. And with me, to shine a little bit of light on this, I have Tuomo Pentikäinen, who's the CEO of VEIL.AI. Welcome, Tuomo, and we're going to have a really, really fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much, and great pleasure to be here. Very nice to talk about the topic, and we are VEIL.AI, and a company which is having very deep roots in the medical research, in genomic, and in the healthcare related research in Finland and in Scandinavia. We are a spin-out company from Finnish Institute for Molecular Medicine, and what we are doing is helping the topic that everybody needs a lot of data. We all have seen at least in the news, maybe in our desks, that machine learning, artificial intelligence, they are giving very great promises for new drug discoveries, for diagnostics, for several research topics, for the benefit of mankind, of course. But all of them, they are very data hungry. They need a lot of data.
Yeah.
The good news is that in health sector, we have a lot of data. It's in medical records, it's in registries, it's in different places. But the problem is that the data is almost always data of private people. So it is absolutely almost always very sensitive. And somehow we need to solve that problem so that we need to give access to the data. And at the same time, we need to guarantee that the privacy concerns are taken very, very, very seriously. And that's exactly what we are doing. We are offering some exciting methods for providing access to high quality data and at the same time dealing with the privacy concerns.
So in many respects, Tuomo, because what you described, I mean, I get it. I get it because I was years ago trying to access data, and the issues around the use of data, of course, of private individuals is always a significant problem. And the moment you start stripping data out, you get into the difficulty that you usually strip the goodness out as well. By goodness, I mean the richness of the data, and you end up with something which may not necessarily be quite what you hoped to get. And you think, oh, if only I could use this damn data, but you can't because it's so clearly identifiable. So let's go through this process, because so you de-anonymize data in essence. You gather data from various sources, I understand. Now, that's no mean feat, of course, because we talk about interoperability, but I don't know how interoperable systems actually are. And you create a common data model. Am I correct?
Yes, you're very correct. Maybe I start with a very pragmatic example where actually our company started a few years ago. And it was a very large European study project. It had been running for, I think, 8 years in that phase. There were 14 patient cohorts of MS disease patients in 14 European countries. And then we got a new funding. It was quite extensive, like I think it was more than 5 million euros.
Yeah.
And of the project that was supposed to last for 5 years, it took more than 3 years to get access to the data. So that the actual data was in the in the repositories of the participating hospitals or universities in the different countries. And then what we then our technical team were starting to think that, okay, there are some of the conceptually very compelling methods to deal with the data sensitivity, and they are called data anonymization or data synthesization. And the basic concept is very attractive, so that on the other side you have the sensitive data, and then you do small modifications to the data so that you are getting rid of the sensitive content of the data, and then you are producing out of that maybe two types of data products. One are called anonymized data, or then maybe you go even a bit further so that you are building the model so that you are really only mimicking the underlying data but producing synthetic data. And the good thing is that on the other hand side, you have the sensitive, highly regulated by GDPR, HIPAA, and other of the regulations.
Yep.
And then after those steps, you have data which is not anymore under GDPR. It is not anymore sensitive person data. And that's exactly what we are doing. But maybe if I still continue for a while, the bad news is that most of the existing techniques for most of the use cases are very harsh for the data quality or your utility.
Yes.
Like just you said. So after anonymization or production of synthetic data, you tend to lose too much of the richness, power, representativeness of the data, and that is what we started to solve.
I mean, this is really fascinating because clearly there is de-anonymized data, which is really what you're talking about, but there's also anonymous data, and clearly there is in one type of managing data, you have a key which you then lose, and in the second type of data you have a key which you can then apply. Now you're managing data for something like MS you mentioned. Now this by definition is a rare condition, so people could well be identified without too much difficulty depending on how the data is aggregated, especially as you're talking about a very large area being Europe, different countries, and in each country there ain't that many people perhaps who have this condition that fit a particular cohort. So the challenges must have been intense.
Yes, and I think that the basic thing that is possibly first hard to understand is that when we are having an anonymization problem in our hands, there are often very many. It can be tens of thousands, even millions, maybe hundreds of millions of mathematically feasible solutions for the anonymization problem. So that you have the sensitive data,
yeah,
and then you can do the anonymization in an astronomical amount of ways. And all of those, say, end result data sets, they are actually fulfilling the anonymity criteria. But obviously, their quality or utility or usefulness is very, very much different. And that is exactly what we have been then looking for. So that how to optimize the process of anonymization so that the end result is reflecting those aspects of the data that are important for the end users. And then what is the other important aspect is that for use case A, maybe a clinical trial, and use case B, some different use for the very same data, the optimally anonymized or the made synthetic data set is likely to be very different, because the use cases and the data content needs are
going to be different, of course. Yeah. But you mentioned in silico trials, because we're hearing much more about in silico trials. And of course, in silico is synthetic. That's the nature, that's the meaning of the word. What's been your experience within the company of, have you seen an explosion of activity in silico trials? Or is this my perception?
We had quite recently a very exciting project. It's a public reference and even published in a peer-reviewed paper, and that was done with Bayer, the German pharma giant. And the task, like we all know, the running of clinical trials has become very, very costly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
the price has more than doubled in a bit more than 1 decade, and the time from the initial invention of the chemical compound to the actual approved drug is getting quite long. So then it comes as one of the exciting solutions to improve the way how these trials are done. That couldn't we be able to utilize the already existing historic data, real-world data, so that we are replacing maybe control arms or maybe extending the control arms by utilizing that kind of data. And then we are coming, of course, to the questions that, okay, the real-world data is sensitive because it is coming from registries and medical records, etc. Yes. So that is what we were then examining in the quite large collaboration with Bayer, so that we replaced a control arm in an ongoing trial with real-world data that was then used to provide a virtual control arm. And then we did quite extensive, actually 2 things for the data end user, being Bayer in this case, or the regulators, if you like. For them, they are certainly very, not only interested, but concerned that you are using data which is not actually collected alongside the trial, but it's historic real-world data. So is it the same? Can we rely on that?
Is it consistent enough? Yeah, I get that.
Is it consistent? Yes. Is it having the same power? Are there some other things?
And but look at the advantage, Tuomo. You are stripping out perhaps a third of the cost this way, or a quarter. I don't know what the amount is, but it is significant. A whole control arm vanishes, really.
Yeah, exactly. We are taking the cost much down, and then it possibly can be run even much faster, which can be even more important.
Middle of the night.
Something like that.
No, absolutely.
And what is maybe also super interesting for regulators, maybe in particular, is that then we are able to provide data for use cases where it can possibly be very hard to build an actual control arm for rare diseases, for pediatric, where it can be very hard, for diseases which are progressing so rapidly that it may be unethical. And then, as we all know, we are knowing so much about the genomics, omics, about the human biology, that actually we should need not smaller but bigger control settings.
Absolutely.
And why not to use already existing real-world data to help those problems?
So your company, I understand, also manages consent, does it not?
Yeah, that's very nice that you are taking that to the table. So there are basically 3 things that you can, or I mean, I could maybe say that 3 levels of trust. And one is pseudonymized data, where we are just taking away the direct identifiers, names, email addresses, ID numbers in those countries where they are, etc. And that's pseudonymization. And very close to the pseudonymization then is often the consent management. So that is we are offering a pseudonymization and consent management stack, and that is used, for instance, by several of the biobanks. And then if I continue, then pseudonymization is the first level, but still, when data is pseudonymized, it is still sensitive person data. And GDPR, for instance, is considering it as sensitive as the underlying raw patient data, if you like. And then the next level is an anonymization, so that we are not only taking the direct identifiers away, but we are applying statistical models, so that let's say that there's information that man between 45 and 50 years living in Helsinki and Copenhagen dealing with sensitive health data. That's a group of people where I know there are exactly 2 people who would fit. I and one other Helsinki person. There's no direct identifiers, but that can be identified still. So an anonymization is, first of all, finding where are that kind of characteristics in data. They can be very complex, and then finding the information-wise most efficient way to deal with those things, so that the outcome data is not anymore identifiable. and then if I complete then the synthetic data is that I'm simplifying now it a bit, but so that the say borderline between anonymized and synthetic is a bit of line and border. But if I simplify a bit, then when we are producing synthetic data, we are building a statistical model so that we understand the characteristics of the actual data, and then we are generating an arbitrary amount of, say, 100 Finnish people, if you like, or whatever you want to produce.
But this is all very interesting because we mentioned a lot in terms of clinical trials, but of course there's something else which is going on now, which is in many respects more pervasive, if that's possible. How on earth are we going to deploy artificial intelligence unless we deploy it and train it on something? And what you can provide, I would think, is a substrate for us to be able to train models of AI to actually identify the insights we need to identify. Because doing it in real time, as we know, is not easy. And also, we're in a situation where we don't actually have the time or the money to do it in real time. This is an acceleration into the process. Now, what's your experience in terms of AI? How much increase in requests have you been seeing from AI companies? Can I please have some data to train some new algorithm on? Can I utilize your services to actually train my new generative AI Bayesian system? How much activity are you seeing?
A lot. I think that is very much spot on that you are pinpointing, and that is maybe one of the, say, big challenges for the and maybe promises also for the European health data ecosystem. We have at least in many countries super exciting data sets, and there can be long legacy. There can be very long time series data. And now it would be massively useful for AI or machine learning exercises, and I think that basically we are needing three things plus then legal stuff, so that it must be harmonious enough so that if we are collecting data from several hospitals, like usually we want to get big data sets, then very easily, of course, we are counting apples and oranges. Then the second thing is that we need to have some good environments where we can do the actual analysis and where we can provide
some safe and closed environments. In other words. Yes.
And also the data lakes in many Scandinavian countries, for instance. There may be some other solutions. That's one of the core things in the coming European health data space legislation, for instance. And then obviously our competencies are needed because the sensitivity problem must be solved somehow.
Yeah. So, I mean, where do you think this is going, Tuomo? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years' time with all this AI, with all this activity? I can see where the therapeutic drug licensing space is going, and trials. We can all see that. With AI, there are a few questions where it's going. What is your sense of where this is going?
My personal view is that it will we are maybe a bit in the early phases now, so that legislators are a bit hesitant and data controllers are a bit hesitant, and the pipelines are still a bit in the making. But in 5 to 10 years' time, I'm very sure that everything that can be automated will be automated. What we already see quite actively is applying of common data models. OMOP certainly is one of the exciting things, and I think it's very important. And then we are seeing that those IT capabilities and pipelines are built. We have a lot of that experience in Finland. We have been collaborating with Swedish colleagues, and they have been building very exciting data pipelines. We have some American collaborators, and that's the way it is going. So I think that it will be I would like to say that it's all automated, all AI. Of course, there's some human control in several places, and the security and that kind of thing will remain as a human controlled thing. But we will see many orders of magnitude changes in the volumes in the pipelines.
Okay. One other question about the AI pipelines, because this is something which troubles me, and it troubles me because whenever I speak to people who are involved and engaged in AI, and I try to talk about architecture, between one conversation and the next conversation, it seems the architecture changes. Now, I am not used to things changing quite as rapidly, and it's literally within weeks architecture changes. How on earth are you coping with that?
I think that this is a very real concern. The good thing for us is that I think it's very much a starting point is that we are not trying to make the data controllers like hospitals or key opinion leaders like leading clinical doctors, scientists to understand what we are doing. We see that understanding is shared among those, and then I think that we see in several of the advanced European or American settings that there's a common understanding that the apples and oranges problem must be solved somehow, and then there must be relatively extensive investment in the architecture or in the pipelines, if you like. So that we have tried to avoid that discussion. I understand completely what you're talking about, but we are offering the Lego brick, if you like, to that part where the sensitivity must be understood, and then we are offering solutions for privacy-wise, very high quality, and then also utility or content-wise, very high quality methods for understanding the privacy issues and then making those things so that the data can be actually shared.
So in many respects, you are now straying into another pipeline of business potentially, because you, in essence, are dealing with data strategies for companies as well, of course, as risk assessments. I mean, clearly this was something which 10 years ago was something which was a line in a risk assessment process for a company. Now it's one of the most important things. Are you involved and engaged in helping companies develop their own risk assessment and risk assessment strategies? Data strategies and risk assessment strategies?
Yes, definitely. Maybe even more so with the data regulators, because we are facing two hard questions. The data end users are asking that is the data of any good after the anonymization or synthesization steps, and then the regulators or the legal department are asking that is it certainly anonymous after what you have done. And definitely, so we have been focusing very much on that. So truly understanding what are the privacy-related risks, making it very transparent where they actually are, and then we are having, I would say, two way approach to it. One is quite mathematical, so that there are the anonymity metrics. They are sometimes relatively complex, but it is basically boring algebra only to apply that to big data sets, maybe streaming, maybe very rapidly accumulating data, but that is basically mathematics. And then either the metric is fulfilled or not, and the question is relatively straightforward. Then of course you can discuss, is that metric correct or not, or should it be changed? But I think that's a discussion that is ongoing in the regulators, for instance.
Yeah, because you do things real time, don't you? I mean, you're gathering real world data and you're real time de-anonymizing it.
Yes. If needed, it seems to be to me still in the market that most of the use cases still are a kind of static or maybe slowly accumulating, so that it is an anonymization and risk assessments. They are run once or whenever needed. But you are absolutely right that when those pipelines come to the full use and when AI or machine learning truly comes a part of the pipelines, then absolutely it's a continuous process. And that is one of the hard tasks for say legacy ways of doing anonymization.
Yeah, of course.
They have been optimized for static data sets, but when data is streaming or even accumulating rapidly, then it can become actually a massive computational problem.
Wow. You know, we've been chatting for about half an hour on a subject which most people find one of the most complex, and it is, by the way, one of the most dense. But I think we have actually made some sense out of this and made it intelligible to normal people. I am no expert, and I understood the conversation. So if I understood it, I think anybody can understand it. I'm the lowest common denominator here. So I want to thank you ever so much for spending a little bit of time with me, Tuomo, because I think you have shone light in places where there's been darkness. So thank you very, very much. And I think we'll continue this conversation, of course, at the Radical Health Festival in Helsinki. See you very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely my pleasure, and very, very good questions.